In this vlog, we are going to deal with the topic dependency injection, and by the end of this tutorial, you will be getting a very good knowledge on dependency injection and why, what, when we make use of dependency injection in our project. So I suggest you to stay tuned till the end of this tutorial, and if you have any queries, you may let me know in the comment section below. And also in our coming tutorials, we are going to deal with this particular dependency injection examples. So I suggest you to stay subscribed so that you will be able to get those updates as well. So now the word dependency injection states that we are trying to inject dependencies into our class file. So here we are trying to inject the components which we require in our class file from outside. So these particular components are not present inside the class, but we are able to fetch them from outside. In our application, we are not having only a single class, right? So we have multiple classes, and these particular components can be injected into all those classes depending upon the requirement. So now let's get started with this particular tutorial. So what is a dependency injection? So as we have discussed just now, whenever we are trying to create an application, we will be having a requirement of various components in our class file. So for example, like you are trying to load an image into your screen. So let's consider you require an image loader, and you are trying to populate some information from outside, that is from a cloud API. So then you require to make a network call, for which you may use a retrofit or HTTP library or any other things. So let us consider these two components like image loading or network call for a network call library. So these particular components we will be making use in our application, and we don't want to make them as a part of our class code here. So what I'm saying is like, so presently you have implemented HTTP library for network calls in your class file here, and later on you want to make that HTTP library to a retrofit library. So now what happens here is like, when you change the particular network call implementation, you need to rewrite the entire class file, right? Why? Because of course there is no change in remaining components, but when you are changing this particular retrofit library, then you also need to test the remaining things in that particular class, whether all the things are working fine or not. So here your work will be increased every time. So every time you make any change to any particular component in your class file, then that particular component with all the remaining code in our class file needs to be tested again. So instead of that, you can create these particular individual components, and you can just inject them into your class file, and then you can make use of them. In this way you can just update these individual components rather than the entire class file every time. And next, why do we require a dependency injection? So just now we have discussed like updating a component, we require a dependency injection. And why do we require? So for example, consider you have implemented the retrofit library from the previous HTTP library, so you have migrated, and now you are trying to test your application. So for testing the application in your class file, there might be image loaders, there might be progress bars, and there might be several other components which are working in parallel with this particular retrofit library. So also you need to test all these components, right? So just previously we have discussed. So for example, in a scenario where you are writing unit test cases, these particular components, creating these individual components and injecting them to your code will make it easier for you to test these individual components by making use of the unit testing here. So you can just test these individual components, and if there is any particular error, and then you can rectify then and there. And also it is very easy for you to inject these components in all the screens in your application. So you can create these components and you can inject it in whatever the screen you require here. So once you create an image loader, and you can make use of this particular image loader component throughout your application wherever you require. Once you update this particular component, then you need not go through every class file and update all the image loaders. Rather than you can just inject this particular as the component is being updated. When you try to inject, all the classes will also get the updated component rather than previous component, right? And the next thing is, when do we require this particular dependency injection? When do you require this is like, do all the application require dependency injection? So what I say is like, whenever you're planning to build a large scale application like a shopping application, an e-commerce kind of application, so there you will be having multiple components in your application, and also you will be providing variety of services there. It's very hard for you to maintain the code of this particular application. Why? Because every time you cannot test from end to end all the screens and all the components every time. So there you can just create these particular small components and you can just inject them. And also whenever you are having new features, so you can just make use of the old features with the new features. You can club everything with the help of this injection mechanism. Not only mobile applications, even websites and various other softwares also use this particular concept of dependency injection to make the software application, to make a stable software application. So now let's go further and see the easiest way to understand this particular dependency injection. I hope you are a bit confused still. So now let's try to go ahead and see a real-time example, and then you will get a very good understanding of this particular concept. So now let us try to see a real-time example so that you can understand this particular concept very much easier. Now let us consider you are manufacturing a car here. Whenever you see this particular image of a car, what are all the things that comes up to your mind? Let us consider one by one. The first thing is like tires here. You need tires for your car. So you cannot start creating or you cannot start manufacturing the tires, right? So it's the work of that particular company who manufactures the tires, and you bring the tires from that particular company and try to inject it in your car over here. The other thing is like engine. Even the engine, when you are trying to manufacture a car, some of the cars may have get the engine from various other companies and try to inject the engine into this particular car over here. So what I'm trying to say over here is like, each and every component in your car, you are not trying to manufacture it, rather than you are trying to get those from outside and try to inject in this particular car over here. And what's the next thing is like a seating arrangement. So the seat capacity in your car and also the seat cushions and all those things you will try to get from that particular manufacturer and try to inject inside your car. And finally let's try to see like bulbs here. You are trying to inject in your cars for headlights, tail lights, rear lights, and inside the car also you require some lights. So all these things you would not manufacture by yourself, rather than you will be getting from some third party suppliers, and all this by clubbing you will try to manufacture a car over here. So this is the final output of the car you manufacture by making use of all these particular components here. So in this particular same way, when you are trying to create an application, so let us consider a screen of an application. You require so many components here, and you're not going to create all these particular components by yourself. Some of the components you may create. I'm not saying that completely you need not create all the components, but depending upon the requirement you may create. For example, if you start creating tires, engine, bulbs and the seat, then the objective of your manufacturing a car might be delayed, or you may not concentrate on creating a very good car. So now let's come back to our software application example again, so that you can get a clear understanding of the dependency injection now. So here is a screen in our application, and what are the things you can see in this particular screen here? So you can see a image, and below there are a list of images, and some data is present and some timer is there. And in the backend there might be running some network calls, a timer is been running, and a progress bars, and all these things are running, right? So network call, let us consider you are trying to implement a network call in your application. So you are not going to create a library, right? So for example, you are not going to create a retrofit library or a similar kind of library for your application. You're just going to make use of a third party library. You're not going to create or design your database, right? Rather than you are going to make use of a room database, SQLite database, or MySQL database, or anything which is available, or any other database regarding the Oracle. Or in the same way as we have discussed in our car example, so in our application also we make use of the same scenario. And image loading libraries, you may use Glide library, Picasso library, or any other library to load the images into your application. And progress indicators, you may use a circular progress indicator or horizontal scrolling indicator or a shimmer effect which comes from Facebook. And all these kinds of indicators you may use in your application. And timers, here you can see there is currently a timer running for an offer or whatever it might be, depending upon your application. And animations, how to show an image, how to move in between the screens, how to load a particular data, and all these things. All these individual components we are not going to develop while we are writing a code for an application. Rather, we make use of the third party tools available in the market. In the same way, just try to compare the previous car example and this particular application example. And now here we are trying to inject. So you might say, what is the use of dependency injection here? We might use all these things in our application. So what is the use of dependency injection here? The answer to this particular question is like, as I have said earlier in this video, when you are using a HTTP library and you are trying to migrate to a retrofit library. So now in this process of migration, we don't want to affect all these other things like animation, progress, image loading, database, all these things. We are just trying to create an individual component of network call, whatever the library may be. So the work of the network call is to fetch the URL and provide the data to us. So think in this particular way. This is a component and you are trying to inject that component into your class file. So in the same way for database also, you might use a room database, you might use a SQLite database. The class file is not really concerned with that. It requires the data. You need to inject that particular database into your class file, and the class file will do the rest of the work. And the same with all the other things as well. Why we are specifying so much regarding the dependency injection is like it makes our work much easier here. For example, you are trying to create an application, the same application, when you are trying to test it with the help of a dependency injection, it is much easier. Why? Because in a real time application you might be using an API to fetch the data and try to populate the data onto the screen. But in the same scenario, when you want to test that particular functionality, whether that particular component is able to fetch the data and load the same onto the screen, when you are writing a unit test case for this scenario, you are not going to make use of a real-time API, right? Because making use of a real-time API in testing is not advisable because it makes the testing slow. And the second point is like it will cost you a lot. Why? Because we are making use of the third parties API sometimes, which may cost you for every call of an API. Or also, if you are using your own server, also you are making use of a resources, right? So to avoid all these things, we make use of some local data and try to test it. So for example, consider this particular class here. Here we are getting an image, some data, some time, everything. So when you are implementing in your application, you make use of an API and fetch all those details. But when you are trying to test it locally, you may provide some local information and try to test the particular component. And here how you will test the component here. So for testing the component, so when you try to inject the network call into the particular class file, in the same way we will try to inject the local data also the class file. And now the class file is not worried from where it is getting the data, whether it is getting the data from API or whether it is getting the data from database or whether it is getting a data from a local list. So our test case will run from the data which it is getting rather than from where it is getting. So I think you understood this particular concept of dependency injection and why do we use it in our in developing the software application. If you are still having any queries in this particular topic on dependency injection, do let me know in the comment section below. In the coming tutorials, we will be going to see the implementation of Dagger Hilt in Android applications. And previously we have seen the implementation of Dagger 2, and you can find the link in the description section below. And for more interesting tutorials like this, stay subscribed to our channel.